This is Bill Ryan from Project Camelot and Project Avalon, and the date is the 16th of February 2010, and this is a bit of an unusual video presentation here because I'm taking the step of making a video as an interpretation and as a commentary on an audio interview which we did with an important witness who came and reported his story to Project Camelot a little while ago, about a couple of weeks ago. And as with many of our witnesses, this person wanted to remain anonymous, but he has agreed that we transcribe the audio, and so we've got this as a transcript. Our source attended a number of meetings with senior Masons, and while many of these were interesting, they were routine by City of London standards. They were discussing financial affairs and so on and so forth. And then in June 2005, he attended another meeting that he thought was going to be a routine meeting, but actually this was something rather unusual, and he realized it was unusual as soon as he arrived. It starts with Israel attacking Iran. Now, this hasn't happened yet. There have been a number of indications that there are forces which are trying to push this into happening. You've only got to follow the news for the last 2 years to realize that the public is being prepared for a justification for this kind of thing. Iran is being set up as being the bad guys that deserve something to happen to them, and so on and so forth. Now, that's going to be the start of what is like the opening gambit in a big chess game. And the plan is to provoke Iran or China to retaliate. And our guy, our source, who is a military man, is privately as convinced as he can be, although this has never been made public and this is not publicly known, that Iran does have nuclear weapons. He believes that they have been provided by China behind the scenes. And all of this is intended because it's all right with these controlling forces that Iran has nuclear weapons, because they want them to be used. The plan is for either Iran or for China to retaliate after Iran is struck with a nuclear weapon. At that point, there will be a limited nuclear exchange in the Middle East, followed by a ceasefire. He heard this being planned in this meeting. This is being choreographed. It's like the script for a movie. This is exactly what's intended to happen. And during this time, the other thing that's being set up for this, and many people watching this will be aware that this is being set up in the background. We've had a lot of information about this from a number of good researchers from many countries who are reporting this on the internet, that things are being set up in many of the Western countries for there to be heavy controls over populations, martial law, increased powers on security forces who are not just the army or the police, but in Britain, for example, our source said that he absolutely knew personally for a fact, that a very large number of private security people, their powers were being increased to give them the ability to arrest people, the ability to detain, the ability to handle riots in streets. And here we're talking about just regular people working in private security, people who give the parking tickets on the streets. Their powers are being increased in the same way.
A few weeks ago, but a few months ago now, I had a letter from a traffic warden somewhere in Britain. He's still a traffic warden, so I won't say who it was. And he told me a strange story and said I might find it of interest. He said he was called, he'd been a traffic warden for a long time, nice chap. And he said he was called in by the boss, who gave him, out of nowhere, 3 cards. One was a card that gave him authority to be a traffic warden, fair enough. But the second card was what they call a PACE card. And on it are the words that you have to say, that a policeman says, to arrest somebody. You do not have to say anything but anything you do not say. That one. It's called a PACE card. And the third card, was his authority to enter private property. Of course he's going, hold on a second, what's going on? I'm a traffic warden, I give tickets for parking, I don't want these. And the boss said, go away and put him away until further notice. A few days later, he's with a group of traffic wardens near the police station, and an old friend of his, he hadn't seen him for a while, he was a policeman, walks out of the police station with a briefcase, walks over and makes conversation with the traffic wardens, you know, there. And then, towards the end, he said to this guy, who's they're old friends, he called him over. And he said, I want to tell you something. And about 4 or 5 times in this conversation, the policeman said, don't tell anybody else, and don't repeat this, whatever you do. This policeman said that he had been designated to do a job in that county, and there was someone like him in every other county. He said his job, and his fellow officers around the country, was to prepare for a coming war. That this war was expected to trigger enormous civil unrest in Britain, and that the military and the mainstream police force would be overwhelmingly focused on dealing with the civil unrest. Therefore, people like traffic wardens, private security firms, and CCTV operators, etc., were going to be brought forward to do the jobs that the mainstream police force were currently doing, but would be tied up with over this civil unrest. He said, that's why you have been given these cards. A few days after this letter arrived, and I talked to him, and he sent me the cards, and I saw them and sent them back so he wouldn't get found out, I picked up the newspaper to see that traffic wardens were being redesignated civil enforcement officers and being given greater powers.
In this rollout of this crazy scenario, where it is intended that there will be a limited nuclear exchange in the Middle East, the idea is that as the world looks upon this with horror, then they will demand from their governments that there are heavy controls over travel, over communication, over people who meet, over people who protest in the streets. They want to make sure that they don't have crazy bombers on aeroplanes, crazy bombers in the shopping malls. They want to make sure, and because people will be driven into fear by this, they'll request and demand and insist on heavy controls from their governments, which will be justified. And this is where you're going to kind of get the martial law situation in all the Western countries. It's intended as a justification. All of this is just the start of something, because this story gets much bigger, and it's pretty horrifying. And if watching this now you're feeling a little bit shocked, this is how I was feeling when I heard this information, and this is how our source was feeling when he was hearing this information in this meeting, because this is just the beginning. Now, during the time of this ceasefire, everyone's shocked, everyone's frightened, everyone's really terrified about where this is going to go. There are all kinds of heavy controls over populations everywhere. And then the next thing that happens in this chess game that's being played is that biological weapons are released on China. He heard this being discussed in this meeting. They will release a flu-like virus that will be genetically targeted against the Chinese population. It's racially targeted against the Chinese people. It's designed to spread like wildfire and to knock out a large number of the Chinese people. And these people in this meeting were laughing about this. They said, China will catch a cold. Those were their words. China will catch a cold.